What was the other Kimlin's name? Warren and what was the other?
Tom.
Tom.
He had three, Don Kimlin, Earl Kimlin, he had three sons and two daughters, I think, but they've all, well, I think one of Don Kimlin's sons still lives in
Santa Fe.
somewhere around here.
Santa Fe.
Santa Fe, yeah.
JD.
J.D. Kimlin, yeah.
For the record, back to the cash in the can, you are presently a director of a bank?
Yeah, I'm presently a director of the Hitchcock Bank. I've been ever since, I think, around 1972.
1972.
Yeah. And I remember when Chuck first took that bank over, he had a contest on who would bring in the most customers for the bank would win a trip to Mexico. Go to Mexico City. But I'm knowing a lot of people. I went all over Hitchcock and Santa Fe talking to different people. And I forget just how many new customers I brought in, but I brought in the most customers. But a fellow by the name of Bob Bertolette, who was the director of the bank that owned the Plymouth dealership in Texas City, he brought in the most money because he brought in big customers. And I brought in the little customers because the bank makes money off of little customers, not off of big customers. If you're a big customer and you got money in the bank's got to pay you interest on your money.
Yeah.
But if you're a little customer that you borrow money from the bank, then the bank charges you interest for loaning you money, so that's where the bank was making the most money. And I won that prize. And it was the 2 first-class tickets to Mexico City. So I told my wife that I'd won it, and our youngest son was still home. He wasn't in college yet, but the other 2 were away in college. So she worked a deal with the air company. She traded them 2 first-class tickets for 3 second-class tickets, and we brought our son with us to Mexico City.
Very good.
And we had a real enjoyable trip for about a week, going all over Mexico City. Didn't learn how to speak very much Mexican, but we learned to like Mexican food.
Yeah.
But it was a real nice trip. And I still remember remind Chuck Doyle now that it's not the big customers that make you money, it's the little customers that borrow the money that makes the bank the money.
Yeah, that's probably right. Yeah. On the one time, your wife told me that you have a museum at your house.
Oh yes, I don't want to leave without telling you this. In fact, my son was here yesterday, Sunday, he and his wife. Marion's cooked them dinner. She always cooks the dinner. I always want to tell her that I want to take them to Olive Garden. She says, no, as long as I can cook, I'm still going to cook for my kids. So they were home, and I showed him around the things that I've got hanging around my walls and stuff like that. I says, now, I know I don't have too long to live because I'm getting up in age. Mom doesn't either. But I said, one thing I want to remember you, and I'm going to remind Dennis whenever he comes from California and Pat, that all this old stuff, if you want to keep it, fine, but don't you ever sell one single bit of it. I want it to all go to the Historical Society. And I've been wanting to tell you that, and sometimes I want you to come by the house because I've got an upright telephone, solid brass. I brought it here, I think, when we had that Italian festival. That still works. Then I've got a phone that's the box phone. It still rings the bell. It doesn't work, but it still rings the bell. That's an old phone that old man and old lady Freno had. I remember that telephone, that they had a phone like that. But I've got a lot of antique. I've got an angel head that one of my cousins gave me when I was in Italy. Came off the communion railing that came out of a church that was built in the 16th century. So that's, about 300, 400 years old now.
In Italy?
In Italy, yeah, this thing came from Italy. But it's stuff, old stuff like that. I'd like, if y'all would want it, I'd like for y'all to have it for the Historical Society, for the city of Hitchcock. instead of them just selling it to somebody that
Yeah.
would like to have it, yeah, and they could make a little money, but I says, either you keep it or it goes to the historical library, and I've been wanting to tell you
I
that.
am too. I'm doing that sort of thing too.
Because I've got a lot of stuff that,
Well, Mary Agnes said you have farming equipment.
oh yeah, I
for
still
that,
got,
too.
I still got the deal that, I don't know what you called it, but you pushed it. You put your seed in there and then it planted your carrots and your mustard in a row. And then I still got the harrow that my daddy had, and I've got the disc cultivator. And I've got the old pitch pump, because a long, long time ago now, they didn't drill a well like wells are drilled now. The wells were dug with a shovel about 6 foot in diameter. And then they'd build a wall around this and over the top, and that's where you had your pitcher pump. That you pumped your water out of your well to wash all your vegetables before you took it to the market. And I still got that pitcher pump. Soup Howard wanted it. I said, no, I ain't gonna give it away. Well, you don't need it. I said, no, but I'm gonna keep it. That's old man, old Cleveland Howard,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
In your garage, you have a GE refrigerator. I believe it's a GE.
Oh, yeah, that GE refrigerator, first job I ever did have. And first, when we first got electricity in the 35, because I did work during the summer, and on Saturdays, I worked for the ABC stores in Galveston. There was 2 big grocery stores, they called them the ABC stores, and I made money then, and I bought this GE refrigerator for my mother and dad, took out the icebox, which I still got, and put that GE refrigerator in there. And it's hard to believe that the refrigerator was still working when my daddy died. So I brought it, put it in the garage, and finally it quit working. But I've had it worked on, and it works today. The Lee Alexander, Rod's wife, she wants that refrigerator something terrible. I said, it's not for sale. I says, it's still going to stay here. But if the Historical Society would like to have it, I'd like to give that to the Historical Society because it's a GE and still works. It's one that had a unit up on top
Yeah.
of the refrigerator.
Oh, yeah. That'd be great.
Because
Especially
everything
with
that I've got-
the history that
Yeah,
it was
the
the
history was-
first electric refrigerator that your family had.
Yeah. And it worked all them years, all the time that my mother and dad was living, and then my mother died in 47 or 48, and then my dad died in 65, and it ran all the time. Now I'm going to tell you all a story about that too, that my dad used to love to make homemade beer. And so one day I decided I'd make some homemade beer with him. And I done forgot how you exactly make it. Made it out of syrup, and you put yeast cake in there and all that kind of stuff, and you let it ferment for so many days. And after that, you could bottle it at a certain time. I've got what they call a hydrometer. The guy from Biloxi, Mississippi, got it for me. That worked out at Mount Sinai. You put this hydrometer in this fermentation, and whenever it comes up to a certain level, you can bottle it. If it's not up to that level, if you bottle it early, it would blow up the bottles. So one day, I made 3 cases of beer, bottled it all up, put it in a room. My daddy came over to the house after I built my house. He says, Jack, he says, you better come to the house. He says, in that room where you put that beer in, he says, it goes boom, boom all night long. And what had happened, just about all of these bottles had busted because I had bottled it too early. So I took it all like a nut with a paper towel, 1 bottle at a time, and put it in this GE refrigerator that my daddy had. 1 bottle at a time, real slow. And I says, if I can cool it off, then I can open it up, without worrying about the bottle breaking. Next day, he came back over to the house, because he used to eat all of his meals over at our house. He said, Jack, and the only profanity he ever did use was son of a gun. He said, son of a gun. He says, the ice box now goes boom, boom all night long. And where that happened, the rest of these bottles busted in the ice box. And in this ice box, there's a recess about 4 inches. And would y'all believe that I had 4 inches of crushed ice in beer in that ice box? And the ice box was still working. That's a true story, too. But I'll always remember my daddy said, the ice box, it goes boom, boom all night long. So it kept the old man away.
Besides making homebrew beer, did you or the family ever make any wine?
Oh yeah, my dad used to always make wine. I'll always remember one time when my brother got my daddy 2 cases of raisins off of the ship. And he made wine out of these raisins. And it took a little longer for the raisin to ferment because you had to mix so much water with it, fermentation and everything. And after he made the wine, he bottled it. And about 2 or 3 weeks later, my mother asked him, he says, well, Papa, how's the wine? Oh, it's okay. He said, well, have you bottled it? Oh, yeah. He says, I bottled it all. He said, well, how many gallons did you make? He said, well, I made 31 gallons. He says, well, let's get a bottle and let's taste it. Well, no, because we don't have too much. He says, well, what'd you do, throw it away? He says, oh, no, I drank it. And he used to drink a gallon of wine a day and still follow them mules in truck form all day long. He'd come home at about 11:30 to feed the mules and eat. And then about 2 o'clock, he'd go back out there with the mules. And he'd plow, he'd disc, he'd cultivate, he'd work out in the garden all by himself with his 2 mules.
And his bottle of
Well, he'd always come home and drink a glass of
his
wine.
wine
Yeah.
at home. Okay.
But he drank almost 1 gallon of wine a day.
Me.
He
When-
loved the wine.
When he couldn't get raisins, who
Oh.
grew grapes around?
You could buy grapes on Strand and Galveston
Okay.
all the time. All these Italian people made homemade wine and homemade beer.
Mhm.
And they'd go to Galveston, they would come in on ships, especially around where they brought all their vegetation to sell at the farmer's market. There was a lot of Jewish people that had wagons and a horse or a mule or something like that, that they would go down all the streets of Galveston
Selling vegetables.
sell it. They'd come to the farmer's market, buy it, and then go down the streets and sell it. So you had, you could buy vegetation of all kind all over Galveston with these Jewish fellas selling it.
Well, I remember when I was a kid in the 40s, a little kid, I remember, they called him the peddler.
The
Guy
peddlers, yeah.
coming around, with in a truck selling vegetables.
I'll always
and stuff
remember the
like
Miss
that.
Delanera, Mr. Delanera that bought the Monte place there in Hitchcock. They finally opened up a little restaurant and a little beer joint right across the street from the farmer's market. And I used to always go over there to eat because she'd cook some real good food. It was right across the street from where Jack DeMac is located still today. But she had a real nice little restaurant.
Mhm.
And she had a brother that was a doctor, Dr. Mayers, was her brother. But he's been dead for many years. But we knew the Delneras real well.
The Delneras, did they have vegetable garden or did they have a little dairy?
No, they had a little vegetable garden, but they raised a lot of chickens. They sold eggs. They sold a lot of fresh eggs, but mostly what they dealt in was just small garden. I used to go there with my tractor when I first bought it and do the plowing and stuff like that. And he would plant. He had all kind of fruit trees, pear trees, orange trees, lemon trees, and He had 3 different chicken houses, and he raised these chickens just to pick the eggs, because they sold fresh eggs. That's when they got a little bit too old for that, and that's when they still lived in Hitchcock, but they opened up a little restaurant on Strand.
Change the subject a little here. In 1960, the city of Hitchcock was incorporated, and I believe that you were elected to serve on the first city council. At that time, I think they were called aldermen. For when the city was first incorporated. Could you tell us about your experiences as a
Well,
elected official?
It was a very